What's up guys, Casual Avenger back again, and today we're finally talking about the new raid in Marvel's Avengers, and if it's worth the investment of time, are the rewards any good, and if it's actually fun to play. So be sure to drop a like if you enjoyed the video and want to support the channel, and be sure to subscribe so you can catch new Marvel's Avengers content every week, but now let's jump into it. Now, as of the recording of this video, I believe I've run the raid a total of 10 times, but I only completed it 4 times. And of course I had to see how my man Peter Parker handled himself in the raid, and to my surprise he did a respectable job. But I'll be breaking down my thoughts on the raid overall, and whether I think it's enjoyable content and if it's worth the time and effort it takes to complete it. Now, every run that I've completed took at least about 90 minutes to complete, I believe, so the developers weren't lying when they said that would be the average expected time to complete the raid. But there have been players who have managed to complete it in just under an hour, like Nate Ace, who you should definitely check out because his builds are insane. But initially I didn't plan to run the raid day one because I knew I wanted to play with Spider-Man all day, but my friend Tex from Vaping Games hit me up about running it with him that night, so I decided to try out my Thor. To my surprise, he was having an easier time with the first waves of enemies than I expected because I don't have a top tier build for him just yet, but on top of that I hadn't watched any videos of people trying to beat the raid because I wanted to go in blind and fresh. But if you're someone who hasn't played yet for whatever reason but also want to go in blind, I do not recommend doing that because there are several parts that can take an annoyingly long time to get past if you don't have some solid communication and a plan to execute. But that leads me to my first big positive takeaway from the raid. It really encourages players to be vocal with teammates and finally makes it feel like you're actually an important part of a team and that you actually need a team, because most missions outside of the OLT fail to deliver in that regard. So I definitely give Adele's props for the puzzles they chose to include that really promotes players to be social. Speaking of the puzzles, that's another aspect I think they kind of managed to improve on, because it's not as simple as everyone stand here for X amount of time or guard these platforms while enemies try to hack them. The puzzles have those elements, but they're reconstructed in a way that forces each strike team to be strategic with how they approach them. For instance, one of the puzzles requires one player to be at the bottom of the machine while another is at the top of the machine, and the player on the bottom platform has to hold a position, but they also have to call out the symbol that the player up top has to activate so that the other players can destroy the vibranium once the mechanism comes out. All of this requires communication and planning because you essentially have to be able to hold your own if you're going to be able to hold off enemies while the rest of the team execute their parts of the process, and some parts are better suited to flyers, so you have to choose each player's role accordingly. I enjoy playing through these sections a lot, and I think players who run the raid with friends or other players who are open to being vocal will get the most out of these parts of the raid. Now, if you're on a team of players with no mics, then
you're gonna have a bad time.
So I would advise against that. But just how difficult is the normal raid mode? I would say it depends, because while you don't necessarily have to have god tier builds on your heroes to run it, there are parts where your DPS and overall skills will be tested, mainly with the final boss fight against Claw. So if you're not quite comfortable, try running the OLT a few times for higher level gear and then try approaching it, but for the most part I say if you have a solid team all around, you should be fine. As for the boss fight against Claw, I think they did a great job of keeping things fresh with the different phases he transitions through during the fight, and he definitely targets the flying players, but it's not difficult to navigate around his attacks. The way the fight is set up, you start out fighting him in his giant form, and you have to get him down to attack his head. Once you clear that part, you enter the final fight where you have to fill up his stun meter to get to the next phase, where one player has to go to a room to get a buff so that the other players can actually damage Claw. So you essentially need to be able to beat him with just 3 players, and the 4th player has to be able to hold his own in the back room so everyone else can continue to get the buff. You also have to deal with the new Echo enemies on top of fighting Claw, so it's definitely not easy, and typically the player who has the lowest DPS is chosen to go grab the buff, so make sure you're not sending your best player to the back or else
you're gonna have a bad time.
Now, the reason I've only completed the raid 4 out of the 10 times that I tried to complete it is because of the bugs, which of course I have to address because so many players are hesitant to even attempt the raid because they don't want their time wasted because someone disconnects right at the final fight against Claw, which is what happened to my team on my first completion. But shout out to Bloody Reckless and Spawn Aqua for still being able to get it done against Claw while I was in the back with Spider-Man. But that's incredibly frustrating to spend so much time getting to the end to only get kicked because of bugs and glitches. Yesterday, myself and a lot of players ran into a bug with the first puzzle of the raid where the barrier wouldn't appear, and once we completed the 3 phases of the puzzle, it wouldn't allow us to progress, which was annoying, but they seem to have fixed that as of the latest patch that dropped today. I was able to complete it earlier today with no issues. My advice is to be aware of the fact that if you're cross-playing between PS5 and PS4 players may get kicked at the start or during the claw battle. Hopefully this was also fixed, but that's been the most common issue I've seen. I think kicked players should automatically receive completion gear, and if the remaining players are able to complete the raid without them, they should get extra gear and units because it doesn't get easier when you're down a player. All in all, I do think the raid is fun to play, and I do like the basic structure of it. I just think this should have been held off until join in progress was a thing, because right now it can be rough. But it is satisfying to beat the raid in my opinion, and the new gear is very interesting, and I think we're going in the right way with things, but they just have to do better with the melee gear because melee is still at too big of a disadvantage in the game. If I had to give the raid a score, I'd say it's a 3 out of 5. It's enjoyable, but the bugs and lack of join in progress are currently stopping it from being able to shine the way it should, but I am looking forward to the elite raid and seeing what's different about it. But now I want to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on the new raid? And for my Xbox and PC players, would you have preferred a new hero instead of the raid? If you have questions about the raid or need help, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Casual Avenger, and if you guys would like a walkthrough of the raid, I'm happy to do that as well, so just let me know either down in the comments or over on Twitter and I'll make that happen. Make sure you guys drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you're new and want to catch new Marvel's Avengers news and content every week. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.